key went in smoothly, the way it always had, but the deadbolt didn't move. I stood on the front steps of the house I had bought 6 years earlier, the house where I had spent 3 weekends on laying the hardwood floors myself, where I had built the deck out back with my own hands over 2 summers, where my dog Duke had claimed the sunniest corner of the living room as his permanent residence and defended it with the quiet authority of a dog who knows he has won. I tried the key again, slowly, the way you do when you are certain the problem cannot be what it appears to be. Nothing. The lock had been changed. I stepped back and looked at the house the way an appraiser looks at it, detached and cataloging. New deadbolt, polished chrome where I had installed matte black, a lockbox on the porch railing, the kind that holds a realtor's key, and a sign in my front yard planted between the cedar hedges I had trimmed every spring for 6 years. A for sale sign with my father's brokerage logo across the top in navy and gold. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I already knew who it was. I let it ring. My name is James Calloway. I am 38 years old. I spent 9 years as a forensic accountant with a mid-sized firm in Calgary before moving into private consulting 3 years ago. I find money people have tried to hide. I follow numbers through structures designed to obscure them, and I surface what is actually there. I am good at it. Well, I have built a comfortable life doing it, and I understand in ways that are sometimes inconvenient exactly how people construct financial deceptions and how those deceptions eventually unravel. My father, Gerald Calloway, is 68. He is tall and well-presented, the kind of man who fills a room without appearing to try. He has sold luxury residential real estate in Calgary for 31 years. He knows every broker, every mortgage specialist, and every title officer in the city on a first-name basis. He is the person at every dinner party who leaves having collected 3 new contacts and given out twice as many cards. Growing up, I thought this was what confidence looked like. Later, I understood that it was something more specific than confidence. It was the practice management of how other people perceived him, a skill so refined he had stopped distinguishing it from sincerity. To understand what happened, it's how you need to understand the shape of our relationship before it. My parents divorced when I was 11. My mother, Carol, moved my sister Beth and me to her parents' place in Red Deer for 2 years before eventually settling in Edmonton. My father stayed in Calgary, stayed in the business, stayed exactly where he had always been. He was not an absent father in the dramatic sense. He called regularly. He appeared for the important occasions. He was generous with money in the specific way that people are generous with money when it substitutes for presence. Bethany and I grew up understanding that our Father loved us in the way He was capable of loving us, which was real, but also bounded by limits He had never examined. When I bought the house at 32, after years of living in apartments and investing everything I could save, my father was the first person I told. He drove over the day I got the keys. He walked through every room and gave me his professional read on what I had purchased. Good location, he said. Strong lot. The market's going to be kind to you here. He seemed genuinely pleased. I was proud to show him. What I did not know then was that he was already calculating. The house I paid $1.55 million for is worth approximately $2.5 million today. Calgary real estate had done things no one fully predicted, and the neighborhood I had bought into had become considerably more desirable in 6 years. I track this because tracking numbers is what I do professionally. My father tracked it because he had his own reasons. The conversation started about 18 months ago. He was subtle about it, the way he is subtle about most things. It came wrapped in practicality first. James, you're sitting on serious equity here. Have you thought about what you're actually doing with it? You could be leveraging this into something that works harder for you. I told him I was comfortable with my position. He nodded as though he had filed my answer away for later. He had. The next iteration came wrapped in the market. The cycle might be turning. You'd want to capture this value before the softening hits. I have buyers who move quietly. No listing, no open houses, clean and private. I told him I was not interested in selling. Ooh, he smiled the smile that means that he is not finished, but is choosing a different door. Then it came wrapped in lifestyle. You're working constantly. You're traveling 4 clients half the year. This place is sitting empty more than it's occupied. Doesn't that feel like a waste of what you have? I told him I liked having a home to come back to. He said, of course, just thinking out loud. I noticed the pattern because patterns are what I notice. I am a forensic accountant. Yet finding the shape of a thing beneath its surface presentation is my professional function. What I was looking at in these conversations was a sustained campaign disguised as a series of unrelated observations. Each one came from a different angle. Each one had the same destination. What sharpened my attention into something more deliberate was a phone call I received last October from a woman at a title services company. Yes, she was calling to confirm my contact details following a recent inquiry on my property. Routine, she said. I asked what kind of inquiry. She was vague. Administrative, she said. Verification of ownership details. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat at my desk and worked through who might be making administrative inquiries about the ownership details of my property. There was only one name that fit. I called a colleague, a woman named Sandra Park, who had moved from private accounting into regulatory compliance work and had contacts across the financial and legal services sector in Calgary. I explained what I needed without explaining fully why I needed it. She knew how to listen to what was between the words. She made some inquiries of her own and came back to me within 2 weeks. There had been 3 separate inquiries on my property title over the preceding 5 months. All 3 traced back to my father's brokerage. I did not confront him. I called a lawyer. Martin Ford has handled my legal affairs since I moved to Calgary. He is methodical and unsentimental and has the quality I value most in legal counsel, which is that he thinks 3 moves ahead before he recommends 1. When I sat in his office and laid out what I had found, he listened without interrupting, asked 4 precise questions, and then leaned back and looked at his ceiling for a moment. Don't touch anything yet, he said. Let me look at the paperwork trail. What Martin found over the following 3 weeks was that my father had filed a preliminary listing agreement with his brokerage naming himself as the agent of record for my property. He had not yet obtained my signature on anything because he had not yet found the mechanism to get it or to work around needing it. But he was building the structure of a transaction before he had the authorization to conduct one. The question, Martin said, is what he's planning to use to solve the authorization problem. The answer arrived in my email in November. My father sent me a document he described as a property management continuity agreement, something his estate planner recommended for single male property owners who traveled frequently to ensure that decisions could be made about the property during extended absences without requiring the owner to be reachable in real time. He sent it on a Sunday evening with a note that said, "Worth having in your files, no rush on this." He had attached a PDF and a cover letter from a law firm I did not recognize. I printed it and took it to Martin the next morning without having signed it. Martin read it carefully. The core of the document was routine enough to pass a casual reading, but Clause 9 embedded in language that surrounded it on both sides with genuinely standard provisions. We granted my father authority to make binding real estate decisions on my behalf during periods when I was traveling internationally and unreachable for more than 72 consecutive hours. It was, Martin said, looking at it with an expression that mixed professional disapproval with reluctant recognition of the craftsmanship, quite carefully put together. I had not signed it. He was waiting. My upcoming consulting trip to Singapore and Malaysia, at 3 weeks abroad that I had mentioned to him twice in passing, was presumably meant to provide the triggering condition the clause described. 3 weeks of international travel, a time zone gap of 15 hours, and a document that said decisions could be made without my real-time consent. He doesn't have your signature yet, Martin said. That means we have time to build something he cannot work around. We spent 4 months building it. Martin helped me transfer the property title into a holding company, a clean and legitimate structure for asset protection that also meant the name on the title was no longer simply mine. We completed this without fanfare. I did not change the mortgage. I did not change anything about the physical property or my daily routines. I did not mention the holding company to my father. The transfer was registered quietly and completely. I had a professional security system installed. Full perimeter coverage, motion-activated cameras at every entrance and exit, cloud-stored footage with a 90-day retention window and real-time alerts to my phone. When my father noticed it on a visit and asked about it, I told him my neighbor 2 doors down had had tools stolen from his garage. He said that was smart. I told him I thought so too. I booked my flights to Singapore. 2 days before I left, I called my father and ran through the trip details I had already given him. Well, confirmed the dates, mentioned that I would be difficult to reach given the hours, and asked him to keep an eye on the place generally. He said, of course. He told me to bring him back something good. He sounded the way a man sounds when things are going according to his plan. I was in Penang at a hawker center on Gurney Drive eating the best char kway teow I have ever had in my life when Martin's message arrived. He does not waste words when a situation is already resolved. Transfer rejected. Oot, camera's got everything. Locksmith confirmed. Call me when you're ready. I finished my noodles. I called Martin. He walked me through it without editorializing. My father, accompanied by a colleague from his brokerage, had attended the property that afternoon. Calgary time. They had called a locksmith and changed the locks. They had then attempted to file a transfer of title at the land title's office. The filing had been rejected because the title was held by the numbered company. Not by me personally. The listing agreement my father had filed named me as the vendor. The company was not me, legally speaking. The entire instrument was invalid. They had changed the locks on a house they did not own and could not sell. The security system had captured everything. The footage was time-stamped, stored on a server in Edmonton, and already in Martin's possession. I paid for dinner. I went back to my hotel. I rescheduled my remaining client meetings for remote calls. Once I booked a flight home. I want to describe standing on those front steps because it is the moment I have returned to most often in the months since. The cedar hedges smelled the way they always do in early summer. The deck I had built with my own hands was visible along the side of the house. The wood weathered to exactly the gray I had always thought suited it. My key, the real key, the one that had opened this door 600 times, would not turn the lock my father had installed. A for sale sign with his name on it stood in my garden. My phone buzzed again. His third attempt in 20 minutes. I thought about the 11-year-old version of me watching my parents' marriage come apart in the specific quiet way that some marriages do. I thought about years of birthday appearances and generous checks in the careful maintenance of a relationship that had form without always having substance. I thought about every conversation over the past 18 months, in every sideways approach to the same destination, every expression of concern that was load-bearing something other than concern. Then I sent Martin a text. 4 words. Go ahead. File everything. I walked down the side of the house to the gate that led to the backyard and the back door, which my father had not thought to address when he changed the locks, possibly because he had not thought about the back door at all, which told me something about the gap between his confidence and his thoroughness. I let myself in. Duke came barreling down the hallway from wherever he had been sleeping and hit me at approximately knee height. I crouched down and let him make his case that my absence had been unreasonable. Then I put the kettle on and called my sister. Bethany answered on the second ring. She had known the broad shape of the situation since January. While she is a more instinctively confrontational person than I am, quicker to anger and more comfortable expressing it, and I had asked her to hold off until everything was in place. I told her it was in place. She was quiet for a moment, in the way she is quiet when she is organizing herself. Then she said, "Are you okay?" I told her I was standing in my kitchen, waiting for the kettle, and that yes, I was okay. "What does he think is happening right now?" she asked. Well, I told her he probably thought he was about to have a difficult but manageable conversation with a parent who had come home early to find an unpleasant surprise, and that he was probably constructing the version of the story that cast what he had done as something done for my benefit. "And what's actually happening?" she said. I told her Martin had filed that morning. She exhaled. "Good," she said. "Good." My father arrived 50 minutes after I texted Martin. He had a key to the new lock and he used it, which was its own kind of documentation, entering a property he had no legal authority over. Using a key he had obtained through a locksmith he had engaged without the owner's consent. He came through the front door and found me at the kitchen table with my hands around my mug and Duke at my feet and a folder of documents on the table in front of me. He stopped when he saw me. He looked at the folder. He looked at my face. Duke looked at him with the mild suspicion he reserves for people who have not recently given him anything. Whatever my father had prepared to say, he recalibrated it instantly. I watched him do it. 31 years of managing how people receive information had made him very fast at this. He said my name. He said he thought I wasn't back until next week. I told him to sit down. He sat. So I have spent 9 years presenting findings to people who did not want to hear them. I know how to lay out a case. I know what to say and in what order and what to let the documents say for themselves. I walked him through it. Not everything. Martin had been specific about what to disclose before proceedings, but enough. The title inquiries, the listing agreement he had filed with his brokerage, the document he had sent me in November, and what Clause 9 actually authorized. Well, the holding company whose existence he had not known to look for, the footage from the cameras that was currently sitting in a server in Edmonton, the transfer filing that had been rejected that morning because the title it referenced no longer existed in the form he believed it did. He listened. He did not interrupt. He is a man who knows when a room has turned, and he knew it now. When I finished, he sat with it for a moment. Then he said, "James, I want you to understand something. I genuinely believed I was doing you a favor. I have heard that sentence in professional settings. I know what it means and what it does not mean. It means I need a framing that makes this survivable. It does not mean what it says." I told him that what he had believed was for my benefit was something he could discuss with his defense attorney, and that Martin had filed that morning, and that he should make that call before the end of the business day. He looked at me for a long moment. He is a man who has spent 3 decades reading rooms and reading people. He read me accurately for once. Then he said, "I needed the money." Quiet, flat, the first genuinely honest thing he had said to me in at least 18 months. There was apparently something, debt of some kind at the brokerage level, that I have since learned the broad outline of but do not fully know, that had made my house look like a solution. But I told him that was a conversation for his lawyers in the courts to have. He stood up. He looked around my kitchen, the kitchen he had walked into for 6 years of Sunday visits and occasional dinners, and I watched something move through his expression that I could not fully name. Then he went out the back door. Duke watched him go and then looked at me with the equanimity of a dog who has correctly assessed that the immediate danger has passed. I sat at my table for a long time after that. The legal process took 13 months. I will not reconstruct it entirely because the procedural record is long and some of it is still difficult, and the outcome is what carries the meaning. The colleague from my father's brokerage, facing his own exposure, cooperated fully and early. He provided emails, internal documents, and a detailed account of the timeline and the commission structure they had agreed to, which were documented in writing in ways that proved significantly unhelpful to my father's defense. My father was charged with fraud and breach of trust. He did not go to trial. The evidence did not leave him a reasonable alternative. He entered a guilty plea and received a substantial fine, mandatory community service, a conditional sentence, and a 5-year prohibition from holding a real estate license in Alberta. His brokerage terminated the relationship the week after the charges were filed. Bethany and I have talked about it more than we probably needed to, and probably not as much as we eventually will. She is angrier than I am, or perhaps she expresses her anger more directly, which is its own kind of processing. I see my father occasionally. The conversations are short and careful. Two people who now understand each other with a clarity that has its own particular discomfort. I'm trying to determine if there is anything workable on the other side of it. I do not have an answer to that yet. I have learned to sit with the question rather than force one. The house is mine. The for sale sign came out of the garden the morning after I flew home. I dropped it in the recycling. The locksmith I called to restore my original hardware was a man named Dimitri, who examined the lock my father had installed and shook his head with the specific disapproval of a craftsman looking at inferior work. He restored the original deadbolt. He said it would outlast the door frame. I gave him a good tip. Duke reclaimed his corner of the living room within 10 minutes of my return and has shown no sign of reconsidering. The deck in the back is going to need restaining this fall, but I am looking forward to doing it. I have thought about what I would tell someone who found themselves in a position like mine. Someone who has begun to notice that a person they trust is circling them rather than sitting with them. Someone trying to decide whether to trust what they see or trust what they have always believed. Trust what you see, not immediately, not reactively, but but carefully and with documentation. Why, the belief that someone loves you is not evidence that they are not also capable of betraying you. People can hold both things simultaneously and function. It is uncomfortable to understand this about human beings, but it is important. Document before you act. Speed favors the person who is already in motion. Patience favors the person who is paying attention. I was not in motion before my father was, but I was paying attention, and paying attention, combined with the right legal structure, must prove to be the more durable position. Know what you own, not approximately, specifically. Know your title. Know what documents carry your signature. Know what authorizations exist in your name because you signed them and what someone might be trying to build toward. This is not paranoia. This is the kind of attention that the value of what you own requires. Do not assume professional competence is automatic protection. I am a forensic accountant. I find financial deceptions for a living. Monday, I nearly received a document in November designed to strip my property rights and almost filed it without reading Clause 9 carefully because it came from my father on a Sunday evening, wrapped in language designed to feel routine. The people most vulnerable to deception are often people who have convinced themselves they are too skilled to be deceived. That conviction is exactly the opening that a careful person will use. And finally, accountability is not the same as cruelty. But I did not pursue this to destroy my father. I pursued it because what happened needed to be on the record, permanent and documented and consequential. And because allowing it to stand unchallenged would have meant agreeing to a version of events in a version of our relationship that was not true. Holding someone accountable is an act of honesty. Sometimes it is the most honest thing available. The cedar hedges need trimming. They always need trimming this time of year. I'm going to do it a Saturday morning, the way I do every year, with the good shears I bought the first summer I owned this place and have kept sharp ever since. I already know how it will smell. I am looking forward to it.